Lords of the Fallen is a very challenging and unforgiving Souls-like, with the sheer volume of tools in your arsenal and variety of enemies initially appearing a bit daunting. However, fear not, for I am here to provide you with a plethora of tips and tricks to help you overcome all of the challenges that Mornstead has in store for you, and help you to become one of the few to conquer Lords of the Fallen. Before we get into more specific tips that you may not know, let's start off with a few general combat tips. Firstly, make sure that you are utilizing blocking and parrying, and this can be done both with a shield or just your weapon. And you especially want to utilize this when facing off against enemies that you are unfamiliar with and you're still learning their movesets. The reason you specifically want to be blocking is because every time you block an attack, you will only receive Withered Health damage. And akin to the rally system in Bloodborne, Withered Health can be regained by striking your enemy, and this includes ranged attacks and magic. However, if you are hit when you have Withered Health, that health will be lost to you. As healing is very limited in Lords of the Fallen, getting used to having your block up, especially against enemies whose movesets you are still learning, is absolutely vital to your survivability. Another combat mechanic that it is very easy to forget is your lantern. Not only can this be used to traverse between the two realms, it can be used in various ways in combat, primarily through the use of soul flaying, which will rip the soul from your target's body, leaving them completely immobile and vulnerable to attacks. Please be aware that you cannot flay the soul of enemies that specifically reside in Umbral. They are already dead and no longer have a soul to be flayed. However, you can still use this ability to push them around, and you can do this to knock them down and even push them off ledges. Another primary combat mechanic it is very easy to forget about is your ranged attacks. You have ammunition for your throwing weapons and your bows, etc., and you also have a mana bar for your spells. So to give yourself the maximum amount of ranged options, later on in the game when you have the stats to complement it, I strongly suggest you have both physical and magical ranged weapons. And you want to start most encounters by picking off a few targets from afar, so that you don't get ganked and cornered, because this will happen a lot. The final general combat tip I want to give you before we move on to the more interesting stuff is about using plunging attacks. The damage seems to be directly proportional to the attack power of your weapon, so bigger, slower weapons will deal more damage with plunging attacks. And as you can see here, using my current weapon, I can one-shot these very powerful cage head enemies. And later on in the game, you are going to be dealing thousands of damage with just one plunging attack. As you can see with another weapon, the damage is quite a lot lower if you're not using an upgraded heavy weapon. However, it's still significant and can still one-shot almost every enemy you encounter. So look for all opportunities to get above enemies and drop down with your plunging attacks, wiping out waves of enemies at a time if you are lucky. Now let's look at a few more specific tips to help you with your time in Mornstead. You want to pull out your lamp and check everything, everywhere, all the time. There are many items hidden around both high and low, and peering into the realm of the dead will reveal much of this missable hidden loot. You can even use the lamp to traverse bridges and other structures in Umbral without being forced to transition into this realm. This won't always work, and certain items can only be interacted with when you are in Umbral, but this is a great way to scout out your environment and figure out the lay of the land before you do plunge yourself into Umbral. And to complement this tip, I will be bringing out my much anticipated Things You Missed guide in the coming days. So if you want to make sure you have grabbed absolutely every single item and interacted with every NPC questline, make sure you go and check that out. As you're exploring, you'll see that some items will be strung up high on corpses, and you will need some kind of projectile to knock these down. In the tutorial area, you will pick up an unlimited use stone, which only requires 1 ammo to use. So especially in the early game, when your ammo is very limited, I suggest you always have the stone equipped so that you're not wasting your limited ammo reserves item hunting. Every time you encounter a new NPC, make sure you exhaust all of their dialogue. Not only are you going to want to soak in all of this rich, juicy lore, but almost every NPC has a shop, and it will be locked to you until you have exhausted their dialogue. And this information leads me perfectly into my next tip. Save some of your money early game. Don't spend all of your early game vigor leveling up. When you first get to Skyrest, there are a lot of NPCs you can speak to. Some of them give you very good items, specifically a ring that will increase your maximum health and equip load. So early game especially, when your vigor is limited, don't waste it all leveling up. Go and check the shops first and make sure there is nothing new that you want to buy. Talking of money, the longer you spend in Umbral, the more your vigor multiplier will increase. Enemies will become stronger and more numerous, but so will your rewards. I believe going up to a maximum multiplier of 1.5 times. So if you are willing to brave the horrors of Umbral for longer, there are some fantastic areas to farm enemies and net yourself a lot of vigor very quickly. And speaking of trying to stay in Umbral for longer, there are many ways to replenish your health for free whilst here. As you can see, if I peer into Umbral, I can see these Umbral blisters on the walls. I can interact with them and draw from them now, but they won't do anything for me yet. So let's sacrifice ourselves and move into the realm of the dead. Now I shall let myself be hit to remove all of my withered health. And now you see, as I jump to this platform and use the lamp to drain this Umbral blister, it has given me a small portion of withered health. You can also use the same technique on any enemy with a soul. They will give you a smaller amount of health, but any free healing when you are in Umbral is not to be sniffed at. You will need every single bit of health you can get. So train yourself to drain every enemy and every blister you encounter to start building up that withered bar and regain your health effectively for free. However, the best but most risky way to restore your withered health is by finding and extracting from these red pustules. They will explode on contact, so make sure you are as far away as possible just in case. But as you can see, they restore a huge amount of withered health. And now, after all that combat, I'm back on full health and I haven't even had to use any of my healing. All ranged attacks, and I'm not talking magic, I mean bows, crossbows, throwing axes, etc., can be charged, and charged shots will do significantly more damage. As mentioned earlier, early game your ammo is very limited, so wherever you can, always use charged ranged shots. They are incredibly accurate, and it's a fantastic way to pick off spellcasters in really awkward locations. And once you have used this technique to kill a load of enemies, there is a really quick and easy way to then go and collect all their vigor. Rather than having to run to all of the various platforms, if you just use the soul siphoning technique, just as we did with the Umbral blisters, it will automatically collect all vigor dropped by any enemies within a huge radius. And a great example is this great sword wielding flaming skeleton here. His death animation can take a while, so it's very easy to accidentally walk away and not grab his loot. So try and get into the habit after each fight of bringing up your lamp and just doing a quick soul siphon. Because as you see there, I could have missed out on over 500 vigor if I'd have just walked away. The next tip is a very simple one. Make sure you've always got at least one Vestige Seed on you. There are many places throughout the world where you can create a temporary vestige using one of these Vestige Seeds. However, each seed is single use, and you can only have one temporary vestige active at a time. You can buy Vestige Seeds infinitely at Molhu, but they are quite pricey, and you do collect quite a few throughout your time with the game. So use them sparingly and make sure you have always got one on you in case you need to set up one of these temporary checkpoints. The permanent vestiges you find are very few and far between, so utilizing Vestige Seeds to create midway checkpoints is invaluable, especially in the later areas in the game. The next tip is twofold. In certain areas, you will find items in fire or lava, and you can avoid this altogether by traversing into Umbral and looting the items there where the fire will not affect you. However, now you're tasked with the challenge of getting back out into the realm of the living again. So another, perhaps easier solution is to just run into the fire and suck up the fact you will take a small amount of damage. Because even if the status does fully inflict you and you do start to take burn damage, every time you roll, you will significantly reduce the time that the fire continues to affect you. As you can see here side by side, when I'm rolling and when I'm not, I get rid of the burning status significantly quicker, and it barely does any damage to me. Another combat related tip, as you will very quickly see when playing yourself, most melee attacks are so far reaching, and both you and your enemies lunge forward so ridiculously far with every single swing. And the reason I mention this is to get into the habit of rolling side to side to dodge enemies' attacks that you aren't comfortable with blocking or parrying, rather than trying to roll backwards and away from them. The amount of times my muscle memory has forced me to roll backwards out of the way of an enemy attack, and they have lunged forward so far that they have hit me anyway, and I've been no better off. So when you do want to roll instead of blocking, try to get into the habit of rolling side to side. Obviously, there are exceptions like AoE attacks that you just want to get out of there, but this advice will apply 98% of the time. The next tip I want to give you, again, is something you just need to get into the habit of doing. Every time you go and rest at a vestige or an effigy, you need to actually select rest to regain your health and replenish your healing items. Unlike the majority of Souls-likes, interacting with the vestige will just bring up the menu. You won't automatically rest. For me, I personally think this is fantastic, because it gives you the option to level up without automatically replenishing all the enemies in the area. The only problem is your muscle memory needs to learn that, and you need to remember that if you do actually want to rest, you need to click on rest. Otherwise, you'll end up running back out into the world, realizing you still have 0 healing items, and end up dying. It's a fantastic change, but just one that you need to remember to get used to. For any lore buffs watching this video, this next tip is for you. If you want to know every single bit of lore in this game, and you want to read all of the incredibly interesting item descriptions on offer to you, you will eventually want to spec into both Radiance and Inferno. As you can see, most item descriptions are greatly enhanced if you have the insight to read the item with your Radiance and Inferno stats. For this reason, even though the melee classes are far easier in the early game, you will get a lot more out of the rich game world if you do focus on becoming a spellcaster. Alternatively, as you can respec in this game, use whatever build you want for the whole game, and then right at the end, respec and just put all your points into Radiance and Inferno, and now you can read all the item descriptions. And my final tip for this video is to always avenge players whenever you get the opportunity to do so. You will see this lamp on the floor which you can target and soul flay, and that will lead you to a revenge enemy. These enemies are very superpowered and will have the name of the player that they have killed. They will have twice as much health, deal twice as much damage, and take only 50% damage. However, defeating them will net you a load of vigor and, more importantly, a very rare resource only gained in player interactions called plucked eyeballs. You can then take these to near one of the NPCs at Skyrest and donate them and exchange them for various rewards. As you can see, you do need quite a few, so almost every single reward is still locked for me in my playthrough. However, throughout your time with Lords of the Fallen and the countless hours I hope you'll be sinking into it, I'm sure you will max out all of these rewards in no time at all. And that is it for my beginner tips video to help you get started with Lords of the Fallen. Once everyone has had a few days getting to grips with the basics and the core mechanics, if you like, I shall release an advanced tips video deep diving into many of the more nuanced systems and mechanics in Lords of the Fallen, such as the various status effects and damage types. However, for now, my friends, all that I have left to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.